When Isaiah Monroe walked into Apex Exotics, Miami's most exclusive luxury dealership, no one paid him any mind. Dressed in worn jeans and dusty boots, he was just another nobody, or so they thought. The manager barely hid her irritation as she steered him toward used cars, convinced he couldn't afford the showroom's six-figure vehicles. But what she didn't know, Isaiah wasn't just another customer. He owned the entire dealership. And by the time the truth came out, it was already too late. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Apex Exotics dealership in Miami, Florida, its glass facade gleaming under the golden light. The lot out front was lined with pristine luxury cars, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, McLarens, each one a symbol of status and exclusivity. A dust-covered pickup truck pulled into an unmarked space at the back. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped Isaiah Monroe, dressed in faded jeans, a flannel shirt, and scuffed work boots. He didn't look like the kind of man who belonged in a place like this. But that was the point. Isaiah was here for more than just a car. He was here to test the people who ran his newly acquired dealership, and they had no idea who he was. Isaiah stepped through the towering glass doors of Apex Exotics, immediately met by a wave of cool, air-conditioned air and the unmistakable scent of polished leather and fresh wax. The showroom was sleek, modern, and buzzing with quiet conversations. Sales associates, dressed in tailored suits and gleaming watches, entertained well-dressed customers, each browsing the $100,000 cars like they were casually picking out a new pair of shoes. No one noticed Isaiah at first. A man in worn jeans and scuffed boots didn't exactly turn heads here. But then, someone did. "Sir?" The voice was smooth, professional, but with an unmistakable edge. Isaiah turned to see Olivia Hastings, the dealership's sales manager, striding toward him. Everything about her screamed control. Her navy blue pantsuit was perfectly pressed, her blonde hair sleekly pinned back, and her sharp blue eyes scanning him with a practiced efficiency that felt less like customer service and more like an evaluation. She stopped just a few feet away, clipboard tucked against her side, her smile tight and businesslike. "Can I help you?" Isaiah met her gaze evenly, just looking. Her eyes flickered to his boots, then back to his face. The hesitation was barely noticeable, but Isaiah caught it. "We cater to a very exclusive clientele," she said smoothly. "Most of our vehicles start well into the six-figure range. Perhaps I can direct you to something more fitting." Isaiah didn't blink. "Fitting." She didn't falter. "We have a pre-owned dealership across town. More practical options, reliable, affordable." There it was, that quiet assumption. Isaiah had seen it before, felt it before. He knew exactly what she was implying, what she saw when she looked at him. Not a businessman, not a serious buyer, just another guy wasting her time. A slow breath filled his lungs as he pushed down the irritation creeping up his spine. He had expected this. He had wanted this. Isaiah let his lips curve slightly. "I appreciate the suggestion." Olivia's smile returned, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Let me know if you need anything else," she said, already dismissing him as she turned away. Isaiah watched her go, his fingers flexing slightly in his pockets. She had no idea who she was dealing with, and he wasn't done yet. Isaiah remained still, watching Olivia as she gracefully maneuvered through the showroom, her clipboard tucked against her side like a badge of authority. In her mind, he was just another man out of place, another person who didn't belong among the wealth and prestige that this dealership catered to. His fingers flexed slightly in his pockets, but his face remained unreadable. He wasn't here to argue. He was here to watch her prove exactly why this place needed to change. A few minutes later, Olivia returned, holding a neatly printed stack of papers. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I've gone ahead and selected a few options that I believe would be a better fit," she said smoothly, handing him the papers. Isaiah took them without a word. He unfolded the top sheet and skimmed the listings. A 2018 Toyota Camry, a used Honda CR-V, a budget-friendly sedan, with great mileages printed in bold letters across the top. Not a single luxury vehicle. Isaiah exhaled slowly, pressing his tongue to the inside of his cheek to suppress the small laugh that threatened to escape. Oh, she was good. She didn't outright tell him he couldn't afford what they sold, but she might as well have. He folded the papers and slipped them into his back pocket. "Appreciate the effort," he said, voice calm. Olivia nodded, satisfied, believing she had done her job. Isaiah let a pause stretch just long enough before speaking again. Now let me speak to the owner. The shift in Olivia's demeanor was almost imperceptible, but Isaiah caught it. Excuse me, she said, tilting her head slightly. The owner, Isaiah repeated, his expression neutral. I'd like to have a word. She hesitated, and for the first time there was something else behind her gaze. Uncertainty. I'm sorry, sir, but the owner doesn't handle direct sales. They don't meet with customers. Her tone was polite, but the condescension was still there, woven into every carefully chosen word. Isaiah nodded slowly, his voice casual. I understand, but maybe you could give them a call. Let them know I'm here. Olivia sighed, her patience thinning. Sir, I don't want to waste your time. Isaiah pulled his phone from his pocket and started scrolling. No need, he interrupted smoothly, lifting the phone to his ear. I'll call them myself. The slight smirk on Olivia's face disappeared. Her body stiffened, the realization creeping into her expression as her eyes darted between Isaiah and the phone in his hand. Wait, what are you doing? She asked, her voice quieter now. Isaiah didn't even look at her as he spoke into the phone. Yeah, it's me, I'm at the dealership. Looks like we've got a little misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here? He ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and turned back to Olivia with an easy smile. They'll be here shortly. Silence. For the first time since he stepped into Apex Exotics, Olivia had nothing to say. The tension in the showroom was palpable. Isaiah stood calmly, his hands in his pockets, while Olivia's face shifted through a range of emotions, mild annoyance, confusion, and something closer to dread. Around them the quiet hum of conversation had slowed. A few employees had turned their attention toward the exchange, sensing that something unexpected was happening. Isaiah could practically hear Olivia's thoughts. Who the hell did this man just call? She straightened her blazer, forcing a controlled breath. Sir, I'm not sure who you think you just called, but as I said before, the owner does not meet with customers directly. They trust us to handle sales professionally. Isaiah raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. That's so, her lips pressed into a thin line. Yes, now if you'd like, I can set you up with a consultant who can go over financing options. Isaiah let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. That won't be necessary. The doors to the showroom suddenly swung open. The crisp sound of polished dress shoes hitting marble floors cut through the silence as Jacob Sinclair, the regional director, strode inside. He was the kind of man who commanded attention, tall, sharply dressed in a navy suit, and exuding authority. The moment he spotted Isaiah, his serious expression shifted into one of warmth and urgency. Mr. Monroe, Jacob called, his voice booming through the showroom. So good to see you. I wasn't expecting you today. Isaiah grinned slightly, extending his hand. Figured I'd drop in, see how things are running. The tension in the room exploded. A slow dawning horror crossed Olivia's face. She took a small, involuntary step back, her clipboard shaking in her hands. Mr. Monroe, she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Jacob turned toward her, his warmth replaced with a sharp, professional coldness. I see you've already met Mr. Monroe, Olivia. She swallowed hard. I didn't realize. Jacob's jaw tightened. Didn't realize he's the new owner of this dealership. The room was dead silent. A few employees stared, wide-eyed. One of them muttered a quiet, "Oh damn." Isaiah turned to Olivia, his face calm, but his eyes were razor-sharp. Yeah, funny how that works. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The confidence, the dismissiveness, it was all gone. Jacob sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Mr. Monroe, I'd like to personally apologize for. Isaiah raised a hand, stopping him. Hold that thought, Jacob. He turned back to Olivia, tilting his head slightly. I'd rather hear what she has to say first. Olivia froze. Every set of eyes in the showroom landed on her. Isaiah waited, and for the first time since he walked in, Olivia had no control. For the first time since she approached Isaiah, Olivia Hastings was speechless. The weight of what had just happened crashed down on her like a tidal wave. Just minutes ago, she had been evaluating Isaiah, dismissing him, steering him toward budget-friendly options with a polished condescension that she had mastered over the years. Now that same man stood before her, not as some out-of-place customer, but as the new owner of Apex Exotics. The silence in the showroom stretched, thick with an unbearable tension. Employees who had been occupied with clients now stood frozen, whispering among themselves, watching Olivia's humiliating realization unfold in real time. Jacob Sinclair, the regional director, was the first to break the silence. "Mr. Monroe, I'd like to personally apologize for—" Isaiah held up a hand, stopping him. "Not yet, Jacob. Let's give Olivia a chance to explain first." All eyes turned to her. Her face, usually poised and polished, was now drained of color. Her grip tightened around her clipboard, as if it could somehow anchor her to solid ground. Her mouth opened, then closed again. No words came. Isaiah tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. Nothing to say. Olivia's throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. I didn't know," she finally forced out, her voice barely above a whisper. Isaiah nodded slowly. "That much is obvious." His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it now. She tried again, her voice shaking just slightly. "Monroe, I made a mistake." A bitter smirk pulled at the corner of Isaiah's mouth. "Yeah, you did." He let those 3 words hang in the air, their weight settling over Olivia, like a crushing force. A quiet murmur rippled through the staff. The once confident sales manager now stood exposed, her carefully curated superiority stripped away. Isaiah let out a slow exhale, then took a step forward, his tone controlled but firm. "Tell me something, Olivia. If I weren't the owner, would you have treated me any differently?" Olivia's eyes darted to Jacob, then back to Isaiah. Her fingers gripped the clipboard so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. She had no answer, because they both knew the truth. Isaiah's gaze never wavered. "That's what I thought." He turned slightly, addressing the entire room now. "And that's exactly the problem." Another murmur swept through the employees, some shifting uncomfortably, others watching Olivia with wide eyes. Jacob, still standing nearby, cleared his throat. "Mr. Monroe, this dealership has always prided itself on exceptional service. What happened today is exactly why I'm here." Isaiah interrupted, his voice sharp. "And now we're going to fix it." The weight of Isaiah's words hung heavy over the showroom. No one moved, no one spoke. It was the kind of silence that didn't just fill a room, it exposed it. Olivia stood there, still gripping her clipboard like it was a lifeline. Her perfectly rehearsed professionalism completely unraveled. She had built her career on control, on knowing exactly how to handle people, how to separate the serious buyers from the time wasters. Now she was the one on trial. Isaiah let the moment stretch before speaking again, his voice slow and deliberate. "This isn't just about me." His gaze swept across the room, taking in the stunned employees, the silent bystanders, the ones who had seen what happened and said nothing. "I walked into my own dealership today, dressed like an average man, and instead of being treated like a customer, I was judged. Not for my interest, not for my character, but for what someone assumed I could or couldn't afford." Isaiah turned his eyes back to Olivia. "So I ask again, if I wasn't the owner, would I have been treated any differently?" Her face burned. She opened her mouth, but hesitation choked her response. Because she knew the truth. Instead, someone else spoke. A younger salesman standing near the reception desk shifted uncomfortably before clearing his throat. "Sir, we didn't know who you were." Isaiah turned his attention to him, his expression unreadable. "And that's the problem." The young salesman looked away, clearly uncomfortable. But Isaiah wasn't angry. He wasn't even disappointed. He was making a point. He took a step forward, addressing not just Olivia now, but the entire staff. "This dealership isn't just about selling cars. It's about service. It's about reputation. And more than anything, it's about respect." His voice dropped slightly, quieter, but no less powerful. "And if you're only willing to give that respect to people who look like they belong here, then you don't belong here." A few employees swallowed hard. Others shifted on their feet. The reality of what he was saying was hitting them. Jacob, who had been standing near the side, watching carefully, finally spoke. "Mr. Monroe, I want to personally apologize for what happened today. This is not how we conduct business." Isaiah held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slightly. "We'll see about that." Then, without missing a beat, he turned back to Olivia. "Let's find out what kind of business I really own." The silence inside Apex Exotics was suffocating. Every employee, every customer, even the ones who had pretended not to notice before, were watching now. Olivia Hastings, Once the commanding presence of the showroom, stood frozen, her clipboard clutched so tightly that her knuckles had gone white. The woman who had effortlessly dismissed Isaiah, only minutes ago now, looked as if she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. But Isaiah wasn't finished. He turned slowly, addressing everyone in the room. His voice was calm, steady as steel, but sharp enough to cut through the air. I don't care how expensive the cars are. I don't care how exclusive the clientele is. What I care about is how people are treated when they walk through that door. He let the words sink in. And today I saw something ugly. A few employees shifted uncomfortably. Others looked straight ahead, avoiding eye contact. The ones who had laughed, who had exchanged glances when Olivia shut him down, were suddenly wishing they had done something different. Isaiah turned his gaze back to Olivia. I asked you before if you would have treated me differently, if I walked in here wearing a tailored suit and a Rolex. You didn't answer me. Olivia's lips parted, her face still pale, but no words came. I think we both know the answer. She swallowed hard. She started, but her voice faltered. She wasn't just facing Isaiah anymore. She was facing every single person in the dealership. Isaiah's expression didn't change. I built my success on two things, hard work and respect. But what I've seen here today, this wasn't respect. This was judgment, and that's not going to fly anymore. Jacob Sinclair, the regional director, cleared his throat, stepping forward slightly. Mr. Monroe, I assure you this will be handled. Apex Exotics takes professionalism very seriously. Isaiah turned to him, his voice clipped. Then you should have handled it before I walked in here. Jacob hesitated, clearly trying to gauge how deep this was about to go. Isaiah exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Here's what's going to happen. Things are going to change around here. And it's not going to be just for show. Every customer that walks through that door, whether they're in a suit or jeans, gets treated with the same level of respect. No exceptions. He turned back to Olivia one last time. You misjudged me, and I could fire you for it. But instead I'll give you one chance. A flicker of hope and fear crossed her face. You can stay, but you're going to learn what real customer service looks like. And if you ever pull this stunt again. His voice dropped lower, his next words slow, deliberate, final. You won't get another warning. Olivia nodded quickly, her throat tight, her pride shattered. Isaiah looked around the room one last time. Lessons over. Let's get to work. Isaiah's words settled over the showroom, like a final verdict. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. Olivia Hastings, who had walked into this conversation with authority and control, now stood completely stripped of both. She wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. But Isaiah wasn't here to humiliate her. He was here to make a point. He let the silence stretch, his gaze sweeping across the room. Employees who had once been indifferent to the situation now looked tense, shifting on their feet, realizing just how much the culture at Apex Exotics was about to change. Isaiah finally spoke, his voice quieter, but no less powerful. Respect isn't just about who you think can afford a car. It's about how you treat people, period. He turned toward Jacob Sinclair, the regional director, who had been standing by like a man walking a tightrope, desperate to keep the situation from unraveling further. Starting today, I want a complete evaluation of how this dealership operates, Isaiah said. Customer service, sales strategies, hiring practices. If there's a culture of bias here, I want it gone. Jacob nodded quickly. Understood, Mr. Monroe. We'll implement the necessary changes. Isaiah's eyes darkened slightly. Not necessary changes, the right changes. Jacob swallowed hard. Of course. Isaiah turned back to Olivia. Her hands were still clasped around her clipboard, her carefully composed exterior fractured but not entirely broken. He respected that. She was shaken, but she wasn't crumbling. Olivia, he said, his voice level. I told you I'd give you a second chance, but that doesn't mean you're off the hook. She straightened slightly, bracing herself. I understand. Good, Isaiah said. Because moving forward, I expect you to lead by example. That means retraining yourself and your team on what customer service actually means. And if I catch this kind of behavior again, he let the question hang. Olivia nodded quickly. It won't happen again. Isaiah studied her for a moment, then gave a single nod. We'll see. With that, he turned back to the rest of the employees, his stance firm. Apex Exotics isn't just about selling luxury cars. It's about the experience. And from now on, that experience will be built on respect. A quiet murmur rippled through the showroom. Not resistance, but realization. Change was coming. Isaiah exhaled, glancing around. There was a lot of work ahead, but for the first time he felt like it was work worth doing. Isaiah took one last look around the showroom. The weight of his words still lingered in the air, pressing down on everyone. This wasn't just about Olivia. It wasn't just about him. It was about setting a new standard. A dealership that didn't judge people by what they wore, but by how they were treated. Jacob nodded in understanding, already pulling out his phone to start making the changes. Isaiah demanded. Olivia remained stiff, her pride dented, but Isaiah saw something else in her now, determination. Maybe she'd learn from this. Maybe she wouldn't. But the choice was hers to make. Isaiah turned, heading toward the exit. Employees scrambled back to work, but the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations were quieter. The usual arrogance had faded. People were thinking now. Jacob called out, "We'll have that meeting set up for next week, Mr. Monroe." Isaiah nodded without looking back. Good. Because this is just the beginning. As he stepped outside, the Miami sun hit his face, and for the first time that day, he let himself smile. Apex Exotics would never be the same again, and that was exactly the way it should be. Isaiah Monroe's experience at Apex Exotics is more than just a story. It's a mirror reflecting the reality of bias in business and society. It reveals an uncomfortable truth. People are too often judged by appearances rather than their character, potential, or worth. How many times have people been dismissed, underestimated, or overlooked simply because they didn't look the part? This story reminds us that respect should not be a privilege reserved for a select few. It should be the standard for everyone. Whether in business, workplaces, or everyday interactions, fairness and integrity should guide our actions. Leaders must challenge discriminatory cultures, and individuals must hold themselves accountable for their assumptions. True success is built on more than wealth. It's built on how we treat people. And like Isaiah Monroe, those who demand change can reshape industries, communities, and the world for the better.